Welcome to your new favorite bookish podcast, Fully Booked and Caffeinated. I'm Kelsey,
And I'm Heather.
and today we will be discussing The London Séance Society by Sarah Penner. As usual, let's talk about our fuel for this discussion. What are you drinking, Heather?
This shouldn't come as a surprise, but once again, I'm drinking my Peach Mango Body Armor Light, because that is just now. Hydration is just key, because I drink so much coffee during the day that come nighttime, I need to hydrate with something that's not caffeine.
Yes, for the listeners, we record at night
Yes.
most of the time, so sometimes caffeine is not the best idea for us.
But I still drink it religiously every day. Sometimes twice, sometimes 3 times a day. The other day I had Dunkin' and Starbucks, so it happens.
Sometimes you need a little of both. Yes, we have not given up our caffeine addiction.
No, it was still in full force.
I've been on my Nespresso latte kick. I just use a regular Nespresso coffee pod, some almond milk, and I've been using the brown sugar cinnamon Torani syrup
That sounds delicious.
just to give it a little transition to fall
I was
feel.
gonna say, that sounds like fall.
Yeah, and it's delicious. And obviously it's iced every morning, and then I just fill my Yeti all the way to the top with ice, and it lasts me like 6 hours, which is good because I put like 4 shots of espresso in there.
I love
But
that for
anyway,
you.
it's great. How else am I supposed to make it through my corporate America job?
Absolutely.
Anyway, cheers.
Cheers.
Okay, let's talk about Sarah Penner. So she graduated from college with a finance degree and was working in the aforementioned soul-sucking industry of corporate America for 13 years. But in early 2021, she left her day job for good and she's now a full-time writer, which is brave considering the book we're discussing today is only her second novel.
I agree. I actually looked at the back of the book jacket and I saw that she was like in finance and then was just like quit and just started writing. And this is not the first author that we've read about that's done this. And I'm just
Yeah.
the confidence that these women have to just be like, you know what? Fuck my job. I want to write. I am so jealous of them. I am so envious. I wish I had the wherewithal to do that because that is literally the dream. Literally the dream is just to write books and not do a job you hate.
Exactly. And especially working in finance in corporate America, like she's probably making good money.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like to give all that up and just chase your dream of being an author. And she's obviously been successful at it. I mean, doing that in early 2021. So that was after only her first novel came out.
Yeah.
So she just risked it all.
And there's no guarantee you're going to be successful either.
Oh, absolutely not. And especially with the genre that she writes, because I feel like right now thrillers are huge, you know, romance is huge,
Yep.
but this is kind of that in between. It's like the magical realism, the historical fiction, like these are not necessarily the most popular genres right now as far as like social media and book talk and bookstagram. So I admire her balls, basically.
No, I agree. And I know you read her first book. I have not read it yet, but I'm looking forward to reading it.
Yeah. So she's also a member of the Historical Novel Society and the Women's Fiction Writers Association. She lives in Florida with her husband and her mini dachshund, Zoe. So her first novel, The Last Apothecary, was written in 2021, and that was really successful. It has over 327,000 reviews on Goodreads.
Wow.
That's a lot.
Especially for your first book.
Yeah. And it seems like this one is still new enough that it's building to that level, but most of her online promotion is centered around her first novel.
Mm-hmm.
So this book, The London Séance Society, was published in March of this year, 2023. It was a Book of the Month pick, which I know that's where you got it.
That's how I got it, yep.
And it falls under the following genres: historical fiction, magical realism, mystery, and paranormal. So to be seen if it wins any Goodreads awards this year.
It says it just came out this year. We don't know.
Yeah, we don't know yet, but
actually,
we'll
is this
see.
the first book we've done that's come out this year? I think it is.
It might be.
I think it might be.
Okay.
Yeah, I know, right? Because I feel like every other book we've read, there's been awards that they've been
Yeah.
awarded. So,
Yeah, like Divergent, which existed before Goodreads existed, even though it didn't. Whoopsie. Anyway, all right, so here's a Goodreads summary. 1873. In an abandoned chateau on the outskirts of Paris, a dark seance is about to take place, led by acclaimed spiritualist Vaudeline de Alaire. Known worldwide for her talent in conjuring the spirits of murder victims to ascertain the identities of the people who killed them, she is highly sought after by widows and investigators alike. Lena Wicks has come to Paris to find answers about her sister's death, but to do so, she must embrace the unknown and overcome her own logic-driven bias against the occult. When Vaudeline is beckoned to England to solve a high-profile murder, Lena accompanies her as an understudy. But as the women team up with the powerful men of London's exclusive Séance Society to solve the mystery, they begin to suspect that they are not merely out to solve a crime, but perhaps entangled in one themselves. I mean, this sets you up.
yeah, and to before we even begin, Vaudeline's job, amazing. Love it. I love that her job is communicating with victims of murder because amazing. That's how it should be.
Yeah, it's like this little true crime aspect,
Uh-huh.
which I didn't see it for what it is, but
Yeah.
it is.
Yeah. I really like that. I like that was her specific thing that she did as a medium.
Yes.
Because
Yeah.
it could have gone in so many different directions, and I like that was the direction that the author took to start you
And
out.
even that she had a specification, because that's not something that you normally hear about.
No, so I thought that was a really cool tidbit to the novel.
Yeah. All right, so we've got a lot going on here. There's the obvious lots of death, spirits, seances. Then we've got some toxic masculinity, extortion, fraud, and some queer love.
Mm-hmm. The queer
So
love
let's
I
get
was
into
not
it.
expecting when it first came up between Lena and
Eloise.
Eloise. Thank you. When that first came up, I was like, oh, okay. I was like, I
This
like
is the
this.
real twist of the book. Like,
Yeah.
yes, there is a mystery to be solved, but I did not see this coming, and I loved it.
Oh, me too. It was definitely it was good. It was really good.
All right, so we open during a seance, as they said in the description, where we're introduced to two of our main characters, Lena and Vaudeline. Lena chooses to study under Vaudeline because her own sister was not only obsessed with her and studied under her, but she was also murdered and her killer wasn't found. But the catch is that Lena doesn't really believe in the supernatural at all. So it's weird that she's studying under Vaudeline. Basically, I think it's a way to feel closer to her sister, but to also feel like she's doing something because the
Mm-hmm.
police are not doing a thing.
Yeah.
And even though she doesn't truly believe that she's going to find Evie's killer through a seance, she still sees that as the only avenue to pursue.
Yeah. It was actually, I thought that was another interesting way to go about the story, is having Lena be such a skeptic about
Mm-hmm.
the paranormal and the spiritual world. And
But also a weird thing because it's like, why does Vaudeline even entertain the fact of Lena studying under her?
maybe because she wants to help Lena figure out who killed Evie. Like maybe because it seemed like Vaudeline had a good relationship with Evie.
Mm-hmm. She saw that Lena had a natural
Yeah.
medium quality, so I wonder if
Mm-hmm.
she like sensed that about her when she met her and
I
was
agree.
like, "Oh, I'm going to be able to convince her because she has
That's
this
probably what
gift."
it was too. Not that I feel like Vaudeline was the kind of character that wanted to change people's opinions about things, but I do agree. I think that she definitely saw something in Lena and knew the potential that she had, so she
Mm-hmm.
kind of just kept going with it instead of it being like, oh, whatever.
I definitely agree with what you said also, that
Hmm.
she was not the type to want to convince people. She wasn't pushy about it. It was either you believed in it or you didn't. Lena was like a special case.
Yep.
And she still wasn't pushy with her. Like it was a gradual, natural thing,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
we'll get into because they make a believer out of Lena. Spoiler alert. Okay, so as we said, Vaudeline is a medium, but she has very specific specialty in seances. So, from the book, she was known throughout the world for her skill in conjuring the spirits of murder victims in order to ascertain the identities of their killers. These ghosts were victims of violence and gone too soon. They'd been murdered, every one of them, and worse, their killers had gotten away. So, like we said, that's awesome. Like
Yeah.
to use that gift to help people in that way
Mm-hmm.
is so admirable, and they just kind of like gloss over it.
But I also like that the caveat is that it has to be at the place they were murdered. Like the seance has to occur at the
Mm,
location of where they were murdered. I'm like, oh, that's a fun little quirk too.
yeah,
You
because
know?
they also say a lot of people weren't on board with it because of that. Like a lot of
Mm-hmm.
these, especially the seance what they open with, the parents didn't want to be in the place where their child
Yeah,
had been murdered. So it's
exactly.
kind of like yeah, you can get the answers you want, but it's going to make you uncomfortable in the process.
It's very morbid.
Oh yeah. This whole book is very morbid. So the story switches from two POVs. Lena is one of them, and Mr. Morley is the other. And he is how we are introduced to the London Seance Society. So this is how it's described in the book. Established in 1860, the mission of the London Seance Society is to provide clairvoyance and mediumship services throughout the City of London with the intent of providing peace to mourners and satisfying the populace's growing curiosity about the afterlife. So this is more of a general, you want to have a seance to talk to your dead loved one
Yeah.
just to say goodbye
Yeah.
and to see if there is afterlife. Like
Yeah,
if these
it's
people who have
not
died still exist.
yeah, it's not as in depth as Vaudelin's seances are.
Exactly. So the owner of the society, Mr. Vlockman, was killed under mysterious circumstances, and it's explained to Vaudelin through a letter that he was trying to expose members who were doing fraud. So members of the society who were doing fraud to con people out of money, among other things, which we'll get to. And all of this, the letter notifying Vaudelin, it's all being organized and orchestrated by Mr. Morley, who just happened to be secretly seeing Lena's sister Evie, which we find out from his POV chapters. So
Mm-hmm.
Evie wanted to find out everything she could about spiritualism. She was obsessed with the supernatural. So she started using Mr. Morley to get information, to see classified books and documents that they kept in the society headquarters, to attend lectures, and even eventually to attend seances.
So can I be honest with you? When I first started reading this book, I don't know if it's because, exhaustion is my life now, but when I was reading, I was so confused and I was like, wait, I thought I'm like, is Evie alive? And she's just like she faked her death and she's undercover. And then I was like, oh wait, no, okay, this is his past POV, like it's his current POV with the past mixed in, but it took me a minute longer than it should
No, I
have.
will say, so there were dates
Yeah.
on the chapters, but within the chapters, there would be flashbacks that
Yes.
you weren't
And
told that there were
there was
flashbacks.
exactly, there was no indication that this was, I mean, there kind of was, but not enough to make me like
Yeah.
realize, oh, we're looking into a flashback. Because I literally went through and I like went back. I'm like, but it says the date, and I'm like, but Lena said, and I'm like, this isn't adding up. And then it took,
Yeah.
and then finally the light bulb went off, and I was like, oh,
Yeah, so even though it's present day, he's having like flashback memories of
yeah,
meeting Evie, of all their interactions. So, yeah, at the beginning, it is very
hmm,
confusing. I had a little bit of an issue with the time jumps also.
yeah,
All right, so Vaudeline decides she's got to travel to London to get to the truth because the fraudsters are giving spiritualism a bad name, and that's her whole livelihood.
yeah.
And Lena doesn't plan to attend the seance, but when they meet up with Mr. Morley and they're about to go their separate ways, she gets a little clue that Mr. Morley knew her sister. So she decides to hop right into the thick of things with Vaudeline.
Hmm.
Also, why do we not find out these men's first names? Why do we only refer to them as Mr. Morley and
I
Mr.
didn't even notice that
Blockman?
until you just said that. That is weird.
It's all part of the patriarchy.
True.
Anyway, over the next day, so this is what's crazy is that this book takes place over like 2.5 days,
Yeah.
3 days.
Hmm.
So over the next day, we start to find out more about the Seance Society by visiting the last seance that Vlockman had attended on the day of his death, and also a brothel where most of the men from the society frequented. So basically, the men were using tricks to convince the grieving that their deceased loved ones were communicating and contacting them. Most times, it was messages from the deceased telling the widow to move on and be happy, and then a man from the society would swoop right in and not only financially exploit them, but also try to coerce them sexually, which is always a good sign when a man is exerting his power and authority in order to sexually assault women. And yet, this society had a stellar reputation until recently. Go
Yeah.
figure.
Mm-hmm.
Some of this is truly infuriating. But then you're like, oh, it's the 1800s. And then you're like, oh, wait, this could literally happen
Oh,
today.
oh wait, it probably is happening today.
Yeah, I was like, wait, is this the 1800s? And then they talk about like a horse-drawn carriage, and I'm like, oh, yes, 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 it
Yeah.
is. Okay. Or a horse-drawn bus, which is weird. But
Yeah. I was trying to envision what this mobile that they were in was, and I couldn't. I couldn't figure
okay,
it
I
out.
was envisioning it as a party bus, but with horses
Okay,
pulling
that's
it.
better than what I was thinking of. I was thinking of like
Literally a party bus.
because I've been like watching Once Upon a Time, so it's like there constantly are horse-drawn carriages and all like in the
Okay,
Enchanted
okay.
Forest. So I'm thinking it's like one of those like a royal kind of buggy thing,
Like a
and
Cinderella
more
style.
or less, but like the evil queen style where it's dark. So
Yeah.
it's like
Oh, yeah. Well, that's funny. I was just picturing them in a party bus with like, like the blue lighting that's inside of a party bus. Like there's not real lights.
so wait,
That's what I
so
was envisioning.
it's like in The Bachelorette when Aaron told Brayden, when he was in the party bus by himself, and he told the bus driver,
That's it. Yes. That's what I'm envisioning. That's exactly it. The blue light. That's where I'm getting it from.
exactly, you're having
Wow. Okay. That just clicked.
PTSD.
Oh, oh my gosh. Brayden. Anyway, all right. So also, as we're getting more information about the society, Lena is getting more and more information on Evie. And when I tell you, this poor girl is going through a roller coaster
Yeah.
of emotions.
Uh-huh.
First, she thinks that Evie is just curious and innocent and was coerced into giving herself up to Morley because she was so desperate to learn more about the paranormal. But then she sees Evie's name in the logbook at the society. She realizes that she attended several lectures on these tricks that the society was using. And the women at the brothel share that Evie even attended a fraudulent seance. So now Lena is seeing Evie as not only desperate and secretive, but also a greedy fraud, just like the handful of men at the society.
Yes, but also can we discuss how her disguise fooled the men, but like didn't fool any but like the women?
Do we really need to discuss that?
No,
I mean,
I know, but it was
obviously.
I
Also,
was
she had like
just
bright blue eyes.
I
And you're like,
was
oh yeah, the blue-eyed girl, Evie. Yeah, we know
yeah,
her.
I know, because clearly like the women at the brothel immediately knew that she was a woman, but it's like
Hmm.
so the other men in the seance in the society are either just turning a blind eye or they just are clearly fucking clueless.
Well, and they also immediately knew that the seance was a fraud, and they knew that they were being exploited. And at the end, they didn't have enough money to pay, so they had to pay sexually.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, I like the way that the author shows that these women are smart and savvy
Yeah.
and know what the fuck is going on.
Mm-hmm.
And even though there's nothing they can do about it because the men run the society and not just the Seance Society, but society in general, but she really makes it a point to highlight that these women know what the fuck is going on.
Yeah, I agree. I like the way that she wrote a lot of the women characters in this book. They weren't meek
Yeah.
at all. I don't think I saw one meek woman character.
Hashtag women writing women. Anyway, so Lena also has a complicated relationship with Vaudeline because, as we mentioned, we find out that Lena is secretly a lesbian and has had to hide it because basically, not only is it the 1800s, but London was much more conservative and traditionalist than other parts of Europe.
Yeah.
And also, Lena was much younger than Vaudeline, so she's, still lived with her parents, and the person that she was in love with is Eloise, who was also a family friend. So they had to hide their love for each
Mm-hmm.
other. And we hear so much about Eloise, and at first I was like, you're introducing too many characters. Why is everyone being murdered? This is wild. And then obviously Eloise comes back. But at first I thought it was just to introduce this, Lena's battle with her own sexuality.
Yeah.
And so now she's having feelings for Vaudeline, but it's complex because Vaudelin's her teacher and also seems to be very involved with the Seance Society. And the lines are kind of blurred as to how much she knew about what was going on, not only with the fraud, but with Evie also.
Yeah.
So Lena is just having trouble figuring out who to trust, who to believe, and really just trying to get evidence, like physical evidence, because she's a science girly, physical, tangible evidence that she can trust the people that she is around.
Mm-hmm.
So there's obviously a lot that happens in here, but if we can, I would just like to move to the night of the seance because it starts popping off hard.
Just honestly, the twists and the turns. I've been waiting for a book that had the twists and the turns. And this book, literally, some things that happened, I literally did not see coming. And I've said this before, I love when that happens, when I can't predict what's going to occur. And I'll tell you what I think the biggest shocker to me was when we get to it. But you're right, once this day begins for like the day of the seance, it's just a roller coaster ride.
Yeah, let's get into it. So, the night of the seance, Bennett, the society's driver, who has been posing as a deaf and mute person, problematic, but okay, we're going to skip over that, warns Lena about Morley. And they were already feeling fishy about him.
Yeah.
So this warning is all they need. They're like, we got to get the hell out of here. So they hatch a plan to escape when Morley comes to get them for the seance. But
because,
Lena
by the
is
way,
like,
let's just backtrack that he basically has them locked in a room in the society.
A room? It's a storage cupboard.
Okay, true. But also, and then he blocks them in with a bookcase, and I'm just like, this in itself was creepy and red flag central. The vibes weren't cool.
Exactly. And they come up with a truly terrible plan.
Yeah,
truly terrible plan. So when Morley comes in, Vaudeline is going to be half dressed and prey on the lust that he has, which works. But Lena's supposed to knock him out with a candlestick so that they can both escape. Okay, doesn't work. Spoiler alert. Didn't think it would.
Shocker.
So then Lena just traps Morley and Vaudeline in the storage room, leaving Vaudeline trapped with someone who she believes could have potentially hurt her sister, but okay, go off, queen. And she decides that instead of escaping to freedom and safety as they had originally decided, nah, she's got to see this through. Which, yes, you do have to see this through.
Props.
So she breaks into his study at the Séance Society headquarters.
Mm-hmm.
And what she finds is the beginning of the unraveling. So she finds Evie's notebook, which contained detailed notes about the ruses and procedures carried out by the men of the London Séance Society, indicating exactly how and when she'd identified each technique. She also finds a letter from Vaudeline to Evie about an expose that Evie was planning to anonymously send to the newspaper, exposing the whole society and the fraudsters.
Mm-hmm.
And the letter from Vaudeline is basically encouraging her to do so and leading her to Morley's cellar on All Hallows Eve.
Yes.
Which we'll get back to, because that's when shit really happened, was on All Hallows Eve.
Yeah.
That's when both Blockman and Evie were murdered.
Yes.
I think not. So Lena also finds Morley's kill book. Yes, you heard that right. A kill book.
So
not
that
a
was
book.
The first shock was that basically the society was planning out these murders.
Literally.
In order to prey on these wealthy men's widows for obviously to fund the society, but then also letting the creepy members take advantage of these women who are, feel guilty, and during the seances they pretend that the deceased husband wants them to move on, and that the man that they should move on with, which, by the way, if this ever happened in real life and a woman believed this, I don't be so gullible. But
well, it's also in this society in the 1800s, it wasn't okay to be a widow and to be single.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
So of course they were encouraged to remarry. But it's also, so we knew that they were planning out the seances that they were conducting based on the widows who had a lot of wealth. But this kill book shows that not only were they picking those people for the seances, they were rewinding it back and picking those men to kill
Yeah.
to bring upon the seance so that they could, like you said, tell the widow that it's okay to move on, marry them off to one of the society men
Hmm.
in order to gain the widow's wealth. I'm
And
sorry, what?
it's basically like the society member that killed their husband. They're now marrying them and they have no idea. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, because it's blackmail, because then this helps them have blackmail that because they have it in the book that the way that it was described, it seemed that the member would then kill the whatever the husband was, and then they would attend the Séance Society, and they were the ones, because there was that one guy when they went to the last séance that Volkman attended, that was, and then she kind of like noticed when they went upstairs and they realized that he was basically like forcing himself on her.
Mhm.
When Lena reads in the book about what happened with Eloise's dad and how she thought it was suspicious that the wife immediately remarried the other guy. I think his name was
Mhm.
like Coleman or something. I can't remember what his name
Yeah.
was. It's not important, regardless. But his name was like the way that they had it, and how like the murder was going to
Yes.
happen.
But that name was the person who tricked them at the seance because the same person was killing all the men.
Okay, maybe we read it differently, because I thought it seemed like the men that were names written under the men that were being killed, they were the ones that were being forced to go through with the murders.
We'll get to it when we talk about the next twist. So anyway, so not only that, but Lena sees her and Vaudelin's names in the kill book with today's date and the location of the seance.
Creepy.
Heather, how are you feeling if you're finding your name in a kill book?
Not great.
Lena's like, okay. Then scuffles ensue when Morley gets out of the room eventually and takes the women hostage with a gun to the seance. Baffling that everyone just goes along as normal. We've got a
Yeah.
seance to get to, people. Let's go.
Yeah. That should have been like another like red flag, that he just didn't like murder Vaudelin and was just, when they're in the
He's
room
like,
together.
let's go. We
Yeah.
got to get to the seance. Yeah, and then Lena doesn't catch on until halfway through the seance. But anyway, so she's internally struggling, not only because she knows they're in danger, because she's seen their names in the kill book, but because she thinks that Vaudelin is somehow responsible for Evie's
Yeah.
death because of this letter she found. And if not responsible, at least guilty of withholding vital information from her, that she
Mhm.
had communications with Evie before her death, or that Evie knew about the society, etc., etc. So we get to the seance, and the big plan is that Morley has a fuse set to cause an explosion to kill them all, to hide the evidence that Vaudelin and Lena were onto the society. And he's just going to pop out for some air right before the timed fuse sets off. But the spirits have other plans because they want us to know the truth.
Yes.
Here's how it's described in the book. Mr. Vlockman had entranced Vaudelin. Evie had entranced Lena. There were 4 of them now, in the bodies of 2, and Mr. Vlockman and Evie seem to have a recent history. And Lena is like, damn, was Evie also fucking Mr. Vlockman? Did I not know my sister at all? But that's not it. So the truth starts to come out. Morley realized that Evie had been playing him the whole time and was utilizing his lustfulness to her advantage, and all that information that she was gathering wasn't so that she could be a fraudster herself, it was for the expose.
Yeah.
So he forged the letter from Vaudelin to get Evie to the cellar, and he intended to kill Evie. So that letter that Lena found, thinking that Vaudelin has been in on it the whole time, was actually a ploy from Mr. Morley. And Vaudelin's like, girl, I don't even know what letter you're talking about. But they couldn't really chat about it because there's literal
there was
spirits.
no time for
There
side
was no
chats.
time for, no time for dilly-dallying. We got spirits to talk to. So Vlockman showed up in the cellar before Morley did. And Evie shows up to the cellar thinking she's got it all figured out. From her POV, she says, Mr. Morley was not only a fraudster and manipulator, he was not only a wielder of illusion, a master of pretense, he was doing much more than conducting fraudulent seances across the city while letting his men take the women to bed. He had a second scheme, this one much worse. He'd murder rich men, marry off their widows to one of his society members, Oathman, he called them, and siphon a nice annual fee off of the arrangement. But, flashback to a nice combo between Vlockman and Morley before Vlockman's death. And this is what I was talking about before. He explains to Morley that he doesn't always understand his methods, his hoaxes, his ploys, but all he cares about is reputation, not
Yeah.
truth. He says, rumors about what you do is one thing. Rumors about what I do is another thing altogether. I've been impeccably cautious, covering my every track. But Vaudeline makes me nervous. She's wickedly sharp. And that's where we kind of find out that that's why Morley lured Vaudeline here, because she was a threat to the
Yeah.
society and a threat to this ploy. Flash again. We're back to the seance, and we're getting the real confrontation between Evie and Vlockman. He asked her, "Why are you after us?" From Evie's POV. I paused, considering how best to answer his question. This was not about the art of spiritualism as a whole and the damage these men had caused in London parlor rooms. It was not about their exorbitant fees and what was given in return, salacious propositions sprinkled with a few ill-timed wall rappings. This was about Eloise. Eloise Heslop, I said. He killed her and her father, didn't he? At this he laughed. Mr. Morley's a coward. He hasn't killed anyone. He prospects quite well, though. So all along, Morley was simply the organizer, the researcher. Vlockman was the killer because he says in his mind no one would ever suspect a family man.
Yeah, and that was like the biggest shock of the book for me is I didn't see Volkman as being the mastermind behind everything.
Yeah, so that's how I read it, was that he was killing all of the men, and the people written in the book were the ones who were, because the seance that Vlockman was at that day of his death, that guy who was trying to coerce, I think her name was Gray, Mrs. Gray.
Yeah.
He was the one who did like the metal detector thing and all the tricks and the writing saying that he would want her to move on. So I think they were the ones who were in charge of leading the seance and the actual fraud that would lead to the next step, which was the marrying off.
Yeah.
Okay, so obviously now that Evie knows the truth, Blockman can't let her live. So he attacks her and they simultaneously kill each other, which is some true slasher movie shit.
I know.
By the way.
I was like, oh, just once like that is all revealed and everything, I just was like, oh my God. Because then the whole time, the way that it's so well written the whole time, you think that Morley is like, I was definitely thought that Morley killed Volkman and had killed Evie.
Mm-hmm.
And then and then it turns out they killed each other. And that Morley just wasn't even involved in like the murders in general. It was just like, yeah. I was like, oh my God, the twist.
And he says like he never had the guts to kill anyone, but he was going to kill Evie because he felt obviously personally attacked by her because she had tricked him and hoodwinked him and made him look like a fool. Which, like, maybe you should have been thinking with your head and not your dick, and you wouldn't have fallen for her ruse. But whatever. Worked out for Evie, kind of, because the positive part is that Evie is actually excited to die.
I know.
Here's a quote from her. This is all when she's still possessing Lena, by the way. The secrets of the afterlife were what I'd always lusted after. So eager was I to see the truths hidden across this veil between life and death, I might have held my next breath in anticipation.
Yeah. I like that was her whole thing, was that she was, it wasn't even that she was obsessed with life or death, she was obsessed with, like, the in-between.
And she wasn't scared of it. She was curious about it.
No, because you don't get the vibe at all that she's even upset that she's dead.
Yeah.
There's no, like, oh, there's so much I wanted to do. She's just like, I'm vibing.
She's like, all right, cool. If this is the way it's going to end, with me being stabbed in the neck in a cellar, whatever.
Yeah, no, because then even, like, when I liked that whole scene, too, when, like, Mr. Morley comes down the stairs and Evie's like, she, like, smiles at him, and she was like, I'm not letting him think that he got me. Like, this is what I want. No, this is almost giving me what I wanted.
Yeah. And not giving Morley what he wanted because he wanted to kill Evie and he couldn't do that. So he arrives at the cellar intending to kill her, and he just finds 2 dying bodies. Imagine.
No.
He's just like, la la la, walking down the stairs, and he's like, what the fuck? And there's just like blood everywhere.
And he's just like, no, Volkman's not supposed to be here. And it's like a whole thing.
So obviously he has to get Evie out of there because her being Blockman's killer would open up a whole can of worms. She
Yeah.
was supposed to have nothing to do with the society, and what reason would she have to kill him? So he transports her body to the hotel where her parents and Lena lived, and that's where Lena found her sister on All Hallows Eve. So here is where just the true masterpiece comes. Now that Vaudeline and Lena have the truth, they let Evie possess Morley for a little while so that he can't escape the explosion because fuse is still going, people.
Yeah.
Then Lena, the absolute vengeful queen that we need, conjures Morley and Blockman and traps them at the site of the burned cellar for eternity so they can't move on to the afterlife. A true icon. Morley's thoughts as he's suspended in the in-between. May mercy be upon the man who finds himself the enemy of a vengeful medium.
I know. I'm gonna be honest with
True.
you for a second. When I like envisioned them being like stuck in there, for whatever reason, the thing that I pictured was like, maybe it's because the name is so similar, but it was like Jacob Marley from A Christmas Carol being like in chains and his ghost like being trapped, and I just envisioned like these two old dudes just being trapped in the spirit world and like just not being able to go anywhere.
Yeah, and they're not even allowed to talk to the other spirits.
Yeah.
It's like they're just separated from them because they're trapped in this weird in-between where they were conjured.
Yeah.
And they can't move on.
I think one of my favorite things about this book was the fact that the skeptic was the most powerful person, that she actually had it within her all along, and that she was strong enough to even do this.
Yeah. Yeah, so those natural abilities of being a medium were true.
Yeah.
And she really did possess those gifts because even when Vaudeline was doing the seance, she was so tired that she needed Lena's help. Lena conjures both of these motherfuckers by herself.
I know.
And traps them there. And she's like, it was hard, but I just pushed right on through.
And even during the seance, when she was only supposed to be conjuring Volkman, and to herself, she's conjuring Evie back into her body. And it was a really cool aspect to the book. And just showing that this girl who didn't believe in any of this and thought it was all, smoke and mirrors. And it turns out, because throughout the book, there was kind of Easter eggs that there was something special about Lena, like when she would see colors randomly, and it was just kind of, she would feel faint or whatever, so you knew that there was something going on with her, you just didn't quite know exactly what it was, and then when you get to this point in the book, I liked it. It was good.
Yeah. I also like that, we read a lot of thrillers, and there's always twists and turns, and it's usually like you're there with someone who you think is your ally, and you turn around and all of a sudden they have a gun pointed at you. I like that we're just twisting and turning during a seance. Yeah. I like that the spirits are the ones revealing the secrets here.
Yeah.
Something you don't see every day. So then we get a nice epilogue of Lena and Vaudeline living together, exploring their relationship and their sexuality. They still write the expose that Evie wanted to write, and they are thriving as successful mediums. Is this a fairy tale with a happy ending or what? I fucking love the idea of people getting the afterlife they deserve.
I know. And it's also nice seeing like a book of women taking over men.
Oh, yes. That's my favorite subgenre.
I know.
Also, in this book, we get a little treat at the end. There's a few recipes, some history of Victorian mourning customs, and an author's note, which I know you wanted to talk a little bit about.
Yeah, I wanted to read it because like I was saying, I don't typically ever read author's notes, which I probably should, and I probably will from here on out because reading this was actually really cool. Not like acknowledgments, because that's different. Acknowledgments are, when you read the author's note, like why they wrote this book and everything, I feel like I should read it more. But what was really cool was Sarah really goes into the Victorian era, and it was just really interesting reading. So it was an interesting like history lesson to get. So I'm just going to read it because it's good. In the late Victorian era, the spiritualist movement, central to which was communication with the dead, especially through mediums, was in its heyday. Victorians were fascinated by anything supernatural, otherworldly, or occult. Parlor room seances were a frequent occurrence, as were public theatrical displays of mediumship and psychic power. By and large, the most well-known mediums of this time were women. Spiritualism was one of the only professions in which women were more highly respected than men, which gross. This had to do with the
Yeah.
belief that a woman's passivity, femininity, and intuition allowed her to access otherworldly realms more easily than a man, and because a man was considered less likely to submit to a spirit taking control of his psyche. Yeah. Oh,
Wow.
it continues. The Victorian
Okay.
era was a time of great prudence and sexual restraint, particularly for women. Yet mediumship events often unfolded in subtly erotic, suggestive ways. A seance was an opportunity for a woman to exert dominance in a way she otherwise could not. I sought to explore this dynamic when considered alongside the abundance of exclusive gentlemen's clubs in London in the 19th century, particularly in the affluent West End. Clubs existed for men interested in politics, travel, literature, and of course, ghosts. The Séance Society was my novel based loosely on the Ghost Club, which was founded in London in 1862 and counted Charles Dickens and Arthur Conan Doyle among its members. The club still exists today and continues to investigate hauntings and other spiritual phenomena. In Victorian clubland, dues were expensive, bylaws were strict, and membership waiting lists were long. A wait of 15 to 20 years to join an especially prestigious club was not unusual. Given that these clubs often favored anonymity and discretion, oaths of secrecy among members were common. Women were not eligible for membership, and in many instances were prohibited entirely from club premises. At the time of this writing, one of the most prestigious clubs in the West End, the Garrick Club, founded in 1831, still does not permit women as members.
Oh my goodness. I do love that
Yeah,
little background.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
And it's just wild when you think about just the ebbs and flows of what's popular in society. And, you know, they're focused on all this spiritualism and everyone is obsessed with it. And then years before, we're burning witches at the stake.
Mm-hmm.
And then, years later, there's satanic panic and there's blaming all of these things. Like
Yeah.
it's crazy the way that society grips onto something.
Mm-hmm.
And then, like you said, then there's these wait lists and it's this highly coveted thing. And don't even get me started on the gender
Yeah,
roles that it
I
plays.
know.
But
And it's just reading that men were like, "Oh, we would never be controlled by a spirit because we're too strong. It has to be a woman that has taken over because, emotions and blah blah blah." It's like, Jesus
yeah.
Christ. It's like, come on. Like,
And yet a woman shows you her shoulder
I
and you're
know. I know.
forgetting all about yourself.
So that's just like that's interesting because I didn't realize, especially like in the Victorian era, how common this stuff was. Like, I think that's really cool
Yeah.
that seances were such a big thing, and people really did enjoy the concept of ghosts and everything. And just knowing that these clubs, there's a club that still exists that is still so women are allowed. What world do we live in? You know what I mean?
There are golf clubs
Oh, I
that still
know.
don't allow women in.
Yeah.
Like, what are we doing?
What is
What are we
the
doing?
big deal? I can't.
We just want equal pay and equal rights. We don't want to go to your golf club. Anyway, that is a good segue into one of our discussion questions. So the book opens with Lena's point of view, and we immediately learn she's a skeptic, which we talked about, and she doesn't entirely believe in ghosts. She says it wasn't that she didn't believe, she simply couldn't be sure. Do you consider yourself a skeptic or a believer in ghosts? If you're a skeptic, would you be willing to try a seance to contact a loved one? Or if you believe in ghosts, have you ever had a personal experience with the paranormal?
I'm definitely more like Lena, or I'm a skeptic, and it's like I don't know if it's real or not, but
Okay.
I wouldn't be opposed to like a seance or being proven that it's a real thing.
Okay. So you lean toward the not believing it, but you could believe it if you
Yeah.
saw evidence of it.
Yes.
Okay. Science girly like Lena. All right. I have had experience with ghosts and what I believe are demons. I don't know if that's the right word for them, but like not good spirits, I should say.
Yeah.
But I believe that if you do believe in those things, you are more susceptible to having experiences.
Yeah, I agree.
So there's a reason that non-believers don't have anything to prove them wrong because it they're
Mm-hmm.
not as susceptible to it. I would not conduct or be part of a seance. I think it's an invitation to bring unsavory spirits into your life. And if it was successful, the whole idea that they talk about in the book about how it's painful for the dead to return, I do believe in that. So I think it's almost selfish to want to bring back your loved ones so that you can say goodbye when they're just
Mm.
trying to move on in their afterlife.
Yeah.
But we have no proof. We don't know what the afterlife looks like.
So you're saying
I'm not trying to find out anytime soon.
you've never played with a Ouija board?
Oh, Ouija boards? Hell no. Hell no. Mm-mm. That is not the kind of juju that I want in my house. Nope. I don't believe in opening up the portal. I don't need anything unsavory
Hmm.
in my house, okay? My whole family believes in ghosts, spirits, demons, all of that
Yeah.
stuff. So you could catch me in a room with my aunt and she'll be staring at the corner in the ceiling and I'm like, girl, don't even tell me what you see right now because I don't want to know. Just how
It's
it
like
is.
I like that though. I think it's interesting for people that
Yeah.
actually like experience it. I've just never experienced
Yeah.
it myself, so I can't say what I believe or what I don't believe. But like my
Yeah. And
mom
it's
has
definitely
had
a
the
very personal
yeah,
thing.
because my mom's had situations like you, same thing, where she's definitely been involved with those kinds of things, and she's always had like a sixth sense. So
Hmm. Okay, so as the story unfolds, Vaudeline acts as mentor and guide to Lena, teaching her the art of mediumship. But at various turns in the story, their roles reverse, and Lena is the one opening Vaudeline's eyes to different ways of thinking. What are a few of the ways the women helped each other with self-discovery and growth?
hmm, that's a good question.
I think there's definitely the obvious way with Lena's growth throughout the story.
Yeah,
She goes from cynical and obviously disbelieving, and by the end, she's not only a believer, but she realizes that she has a gift like Baudelin does, and she's finally coming to terms with who she is and not wanting to hide it.
that was what I was just gonna say. I like that her strength throughout the book is she's continues to grow in a way where she realizes because she lost Eloise and now she has
Hmm.
Vaudeline, she doesn't want to stop living her life. She wants
Yeah.
to live her real life, and she has the opportunity now with Vaudeline, and she's not gonna waste it.
And when you think about it, I mean, she's so young. She lost her sister was murdered. Her best friend slash secret lover was murdered. Like she's surrounded by so much tragedy.
Yeah.
And then she's just kind of wrestling between like, do I want to hold these feelings in? And Vaudeline just gives her so much space to come out in her own time.
Yeah.
There's a quote from Lena about wanting to tell Vaudeline about her feelings. She says, nothing was promised, not sisterhood, not friendship, not the next love note, not the next argument. All that was promised was now, this lone, ever fleeting moment, and Lena was tired of missing her chance to do or say the truest thing while she still had the opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a big deal, like realizing, especially your sister,
Yeah.
losing her at such a young age and in such a brutal way.
Yeah.
And the last conversation they had, they were fighting with each other.
Mm-hmm.
And that's also a very different Lena than we started with
Oh yeah,
because
it's like night and day.
absolutely. And Baudeline's the reason for it. Like she never makes her feel ashamed for how she feels or acts. She's patient with her even when Lena is battling her own mistrust,
Mm-hmm.
even when she's trying to wrestle with her own feelings. Baudeline's just so patient, but also gives her grace
Yeah.
in the going back and forth. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
I feel like she's such a mature woman that she's able to let Lena figure out herself without taking it in like a negative way.
Hmm.
She's very much
Absolutely.
like, because Vaudeline knows how she feels for Lena, but she can't force herself onto her and can't force
Hmm.
Lena to understand what it is between them. So she, like you said, she gives grace to Lena to figure out her journey on this path that she's on, and letting her
Hmm.
do whatever she needs to do to learn herself.
Hmm. And trusting that she'll get there in the end.
Yes. Yes.
All right, so who is your favorite character, dead or alive, and why?
I think it's Lena. I really like Lena. She was like annoying at times, but she was
Yeah.
but she like redeemed a lot of her moments. Her whole character arc during the séance was my favorite part of the book. and just her accepting Evie's spirit and then experiencing everything that Evie felt and knowing what she went through and then figuring out she was so smart enough to know that there was an ulterior plan that Morley, because she kept saying he has the gun, why isn't he just killing us? Like she knew that there was some other nefarious actions at play, and she eventually she's able to like put it all together, the brains to then put Evie into Morley to torture him.
Oh yeah.
And then all
Epic.
the other spirits coming for him in that scenario, and then them escaping, and then like we said, her putting Morley and Volkman together in like this eternal hell, and it's like what, to see how far she's come throughout the book. It was the character growth was chef's kiss.
Yeah, I agree. There was a lot of growth.
Yeah.
I've got to say Vaudeline was my favorite. Edie's a close second, but Vaudeline is just so powerful and sure of herself in so many ways, and yet so gentle and vulnerable in others. She expresses to Lena how lonely her job is and how lonely her life is.
Yeah.
And like we talked about, she really gives Lena the benefit of the doubt, and she helps her come to terms with Evie's death, even though it's putting them in danger most of the time. It's not necessarily the best situation. She's basically putting her safety aside to help Lena. And she's just so selfless in that way. And the fact that her entire livelihood is helping people find the killers of their loved ones. Like, she's just a badass bitch.
No, she is.
I also didn't expect this book to be so sexy.
Oh, I know.
Like, 1800s sexy, where just a simple touch is enough to get everyone all hot and bothered. But also, when Lena finally fully lets herself feel with no guilt, no shame, that's a big deal.
It is.
And that was like a very beautiful moment that was written into the book that didn't need to be there, but it needed to be there. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So I loved that. Anything else we need to discuss before we get to these ratings?
Kind of like backtrack to like the sexiness of the book. It was also intriguing that this gentle person that Vaudeline is, when it comes to her sexuality, she likes pain. And that was another cool thing to write in, that not, she's not like a demure woman that just, that gives into whatever. She actually, there's a certain type of sex that she likes. And I feel like in that time, women weren't allowed to have an opinion or anything like that.
Or preferences. Yeah, I agree with that. And she also, which most women, especially in this time, have had to do, is kind of learns to weaponize that sexuality when she has to.
Yeah.
And especially like when they're cornering Morley, and she explains it to Lena, like, you need to let these men think that they're in control, but still you have the power over them, and exploit that lustfulness. Like, she's just so in tune and has ownership over her own sexuality.
Yeah.
Which is awesome. All right. So let's jump to the ratings. I was going to keep it light and fun with the rating scale, but fuck it. Our rating scale is sleazy men getting what they deserve. So how many sleazy men getting what they deserve are you giving this book, Heather?
It's a high five. High five.
Ooh, high five.
Men. Yeah. This book got a 5-star rating from me. It's like the first book, because it's the first book I've read in actually a few months that really resonated with me. And because we've been doing like the rereads and everything. And I think after like reading like something like Divergent and like Looking for Alaska, getting lost, and because this is one of my favorite genres. I love magical realism. And when we read Spells for Forgetting, like that was one of my favorite books that I've read. And just, it was so well written. The women were written in the way that I enjoy, where they're strong, but also the tragedy that is there and who they become. It's like, it's like a phoenix rising from the ashes. It's just very much just great. It was just really good. And I liked that I didn't call some of the things that happened. And it also kind of gave me like Agatha Christie vibes. And I love Agatha Christie. So I think that was another reason. too, like the way that was written, especially having, because that's kind of like how some of her books are, where like the main character, the guy, sometimes is the villain at the end of the book, and you don't realize it until the end of the
Mm-hmm.
book, and you're just like, whoa, like what I just read. So it was a really, really good book, and I was like
Mm-hmm.
nervous about it, but I'm really glad that we read it, and I'm really glad that I enjoyed it as much as I did.
Yeah, I agree. I am giving it 4.5 sleazy men getting what they deserve. There's so much to love about it. The subtle feminism, the
Mm-hmm.
discovering of Lena's sexuality, the bond between sisters, Lena's journey from science to spirits,
Mm-hmm. Yes.
the women defending their career, their beliefs, their whole livelihood from those who tried to exploit it. Like you said, the resilience of women. I liked the way the dual timelines were written from the two different POVs. The reason that I took off
Yeah.
half of a sleazy man is because that jumping around a little bit did have me confused.
Yeah.
And also I thought the reasoning for Vaudeline being lured back to London was a stretch
Yeah.
because Vaudeline had no reason to come back to London whatsoever. Like they had scared her out of the city. So she wasn't coming back and spreading rumors about the society. She wasn't exposing them, like none of that.
I think it was more because she was so close to Volkmann's wife that I think she kind of felt like she had this, because that was like a small minor part in the book, but I feel like she kind of felt like she had this duty to like come back to find out what happened to him.
Yeah.
Because like she like owed it to his family.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's such a little event,
Mm-hmm.
but it's what the whole story is built on
Exactly. Yeah.
because otherwise she's never coming back to
No, she has
London.
no reason
I
to,
mean, they
like we
had to
said.
hide her when she
Yeah.
came back and give her around the clock protection and lock her in a
But
storage
then, like,
closet.
you find out, like, Volkmann was the one that made it seem like that was because he just
Hmm.
wanted her out because he didn't want her to expose them down the line. So he's like, oh, all these
Exactly.
people are going to come after you. Like, you have to leave town. So realistically, I mean, she probably still would have been a threat to Volkmann. So there's still a chance something nefarious could have happened to her being in London.
Hmm.
But she didn't necessarily have to leave. He was just didn't want her around.
Yeah, exactly. Someone who had a lot of say and a very respectable standing in the medium world.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
They didn't want her around
No.
because people would have believed what she was saying.
Yep.
But I just thought that that was not explained well enough. So that's why I had to take my .5 away.
That's fair.
But overall, I really enjoyed this book. I mean, I love a little feminist subgenre. I love spirits. What can I
It had
say?
everything you love in one book.
It did. I mean, I could have used a little more of the scene where the ghosts are literally just taking out their vengeance on Morley because damn it,
You
that
just
man
needed
deserved
a
it.
tad more horror, and then it would have
I need a
it
little
would
more
have
horror,
it would have been the icing on the cake.
a tad more violence, and it would have
Yeah.
been just 5 stars for me. You know me, feminism and violence. Anyway, well, that's all we have for you today. If you like what you heard, please make sure to follow, subscribe, and rate and review the podcast on whatever platform you're listening on. If you have any book recommendations, questions for us, or any opinions on this book, you can email us at fullybookedcalfpod@gmail.com. Also, be sure to follow us on our socials, TikTok and Instagram at fullybookedcalfpod to see our upcoming reads. Thanks for checking us out, and remember,
If you need us, we're fully booked.